Under a disturbed sky lies a foreboding terrain. Sodden paddy fields and monsoon-swollen marshlands dissuade the errant traveller. But from the darkness appears light, as the new arrivals reach their final destination. Thousands of them, wretched from days of trudging from one place to another. Those who can move on. Others seek shelter in a nearby mosque. It's a pitiful end to an arduous journey. These filthy, squalid rooms will be home while they regain their strength. But at least they've escaped the wrath of Myanmar's forces.
They beat us, slaughtered us, and burnt our houses. Recently, I saw people being slaughtered.
I haven't had anything to eat since last night, but my last proper meal was 7 days ago. My children had some dried fruit on the way here. My children are hungry and sick.
These refugees may be among the last to arrive. The numbers have dropped, but here there's still a steady stream.
We've been here just 15 minutes and at least 200 Rohingya refugees have passed us. We're being told that at least 2,000 will be crossing this point this evening. Now, the Myanmar border is about a kilometre away from where we are, but before that they would have walked at least 10 days to reach this point.
Local Bangladeshis greet them with small offerings. But there's little else here to welcome the Rohingya. No aid, no food and no water. Even the mosque's imam has little to spare.
In
the past weeks, I gave them some dried fruit and rice and wood to cook with. Today I haven't given them anything yet, but I'm hoping to give them something later.
They've reached safety, but their recent past still haunts them. Victims of what the United Nations has described as a textbook case of ethnic cleansing.
And Shamim joins us now. Some harrowing scenes in your report there. Though what you witnessed seems to run slightly contrary to what the UN has been saying, which is that the number of Rohingya refugees has fallen.
Well, the numbers have actually fallen. In the first few weeks when the crisis started, they were coming in their tens of thousands every single day. Now, that number has gone to about several thousand a day, but they've been given a tip-off by some locals telling us that if we went to a certain point, we would see them coming in. And indeed, that is exactly what happened. We didn't have to wait very long, and the whole evening had a kind of otherworldly, kind of surreal feel to it. We could see these little dots of light, these streams of light heading towards us, and then suddenly there were thousands of refugees upon us in looking in a very terrible state. You know, you can see them there. Their faces were gaunt. They had hollow expressions. Many of them weren't wearing shoes, and they were clearly distressed and very, very hungry. The other thing that struck us was just the lack of noise. You know, there were simpering children, and some were crying, but it just felt to us as though the exhaustion had kind of, you know, left them in such a state where they were unable to really make any kind of sound expressing their, you know, grief and their fear.
That must have been overwhelming to witness that trauma firsthand. Just take us back, if you could, to the day you first arrived. Where did you go first?
Well, the first thing we did was go to the state hospital in the city of Cox's Bazar. There were many, many injured Rohingya in the hospital. 2 wards had been set up specifically for the Rohingya, and the injuries were just terrible. There was one woman who had suffered such severe head injuries, a part of her skull had practically been taken off. And we filmed a lot of stuff that's just not broadcastable because the injuries were so horrific. We saw many people just lying on the corridor and being treated on the corridor because there just weren't enough beds, and the doctors were saying that more beds are coming in, but it's a real struggle for the medical authorities. They also told us that the vast majority of the injuries were bullet wounds and fractures, which gives a clear indication that this was carried out by the Myanmar military. So some very horrific scenes at the hospital.
Gosh, that's heartbreaking. What about the families, those living in the camps? How did you find the conditions there?
Well, the conditions are dire, to put it mildly, made worse by the monsoon rain. There was just inches, sometimes in areas feet, of mud everywhere, sticky, treacle-like mud in which the children were playing. But what that did was it made aid delivery very, very difficult, because a lot of these aid trucks were getting stuck in the mud. You can see this kind of golden blanket of mud that all these areas were covered by. And if you look at this picture here, this is the kind of conditions they're living in. Very basic. There's a plastic tarpaulin sheet that covers their homes, if you can call them that, but it barely keeps out the rain. And they were cooking and eating and sleeping all in one spot. And of course, you know, there's very little sanitation. So, you know, there was some very strong smell of sewage right by where they were eating. And the children were playing in these waters, and, you know, the innocent faces of children, you know, playing almost oblivious to just exactly how terrible their conditions are, really just made it all the more heartbreaking.
And have the people you spoke to lost all hope that more aid will get to them?
I don't think they have lost hope as far as aid is concerned, because aid is getting in. We did see the major aid organisations there. It's not enough. All the aid organisations we spoke to made it clear that not enough is getting in for a number of reasons: logistic, bureaucratic, and the weather really wasn't helping. We saw trucks that were loaded with rice that were just stuck in the mud, and they couldn't, you know, get anywhere. There is aid getting in, but I think what the Rohingya have lost hope of is ever going back to the land in which they grew up in. They're just terrified, and there have been compelling reports that the Myanmar military has laid landmines along the border to make sure that they don't return. Now, this is land, they are stateless, they don't have citizenship, but nonetheless, this is the land that they and their forefathers and their grandfathers were born and brought up in. They consider it home, but they feel that there's no way that they can return because they are so terrified.
Well, thanks for bringing us the latest on what is a really, truly tragic story. Thanks, Shamim.